This is the meeting of December 5th, and we're going to note that Commissioner Jackson is absent. All other commissioners are present. The first item for our consideration is the order of business. I'm aware of one additional item that we're going to add to the agenda, and that'll be a new 4A, and that is the Dickinson Armory roof completion contract. So that'll become 4A, and everything else will then move down in the alphabet under tab 4. Are there any other changes to the order of business? There are no other changes. With the change I mentioned, would there be a motion to approve the new order of business?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The motion carries. The second item then is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda you wish to discuss? Hearing none, would there be a motion regarding the consent agenda?
So moved to approve.
We have the motion to approve. Is there a second? And we have the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. So we'll go to 4A then, which is the Dickinson Armory roof completion contract award. Mr. Kessel?
Thank you, President Johnson. I reported on this project several weeks ago. We did a bid. Those bids were opened on December 1st at 4 p.m., and we had two bidders. You have a sheet that was handed out. It should be available on your desks. The engineer's estimate was $130,000 for these repairs. The low bid is Martins Brenny. Their bid is for $78,200, well below the expected engineer's estimate. We did do some background checks to make sure that they are a credible building company, and they do pan out. It does appear that they have done work in western North Dakota. They are a firm out of Minneapolis-St. Paul, but are working in the area. So it is our recommendation that the City Commission award the low bid to Martins Brenny Construction.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. You've heard Mr. Kessel's introduction and report. Any comments or questions by commissioners?
Mr. Kessel, in reviewing the bids, there's an $80,000 difference. What were you able to determine was the big cause of the difference?
It doesn't appear, I had both the engineer and the architect on this project review the bids, and it doesn't appear that there's a difference other than leaving some dollars on the table. It appears that both are going to do a quality project, and in light of that, it makes sense then to award to the low bidder. By the way, there is a clause that is in the bid that says that the building will be enclosed by December 23rd, hence another reason to award this evening if you're so inclined.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions?
They'll be posting a bond as well for the job? Yes. Okay. All right. I'm just reading through the notes. And so licensed, and they are posting a bond for the job.
That is correct.
Okay.
Other comments or questions?
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner?
I see that you got a bond here of 5% for the bid bond. What about the performance bond? We need to ask for performance bonds in this type.
Commissioner Steiner and Commissioners, I have not seen a construction contract for this particular project yet. We would want to get a construction contract in place with the contractor that would include a performance bond as well as a payment bond for this project. It's not technically required under North Dakota law since the project is less than $100,000, but for this project, I believe we would want to include both of those in this and make sure we have everything in line as it should be.
Thank you. Just for clarification, when you see the 5% on the bond here, just as the bond, that's in case we have to rebid it, the 5% of their bid for our expenses to go on and rebid it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Is there a motion regarding this item?
I move to approve the bid to Martins Barney.
Is there a second?
Second.
Yeah, the motion, the second. Further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll go to item B, and then Commissioner's stipends. Mr. Kessel?
Thank you, President Johnson. As we have discussed for a couple of meetings now, the resolution before you would increase the commission president's salary to $1,150 a month and the commission members to $800 a month. They would not become effective, though, until after the election in June. So no standing or current member of the city commission would receive this increase until after that date. At the public hearing, we had nobody come forward, and I have not received any written protests or comments about this resolution. So it would be my recommendation that the commission pass the resolution.
Is there a resolution number, Mr. Colling?
Mr. President, this would be Resolution 69-2011.
69, okay. Well, you've heard the report and recommendation from Mr. Kessel. Any comments or questions by commissioners?
I move the approval of resolution number 69-2011.
We have the motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, then we'll vote. Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Item C, Visitors Committee Board Members. Mr. Kessel, what would you like to tell us about this one?
Thank you, President Johnson. This item changes our precincts to reflect those of the newly established...
Nope,
Oh, I'm
nope.
sorry, we're on Visitors Committee.
Yep.
What this item does is, last meeting, you established the membership of the Visitors Committee, which is also the same as the Convention and Visitors Bureau. What this item will do is assign terms to the members of that committee. So you appointed them at the last meeting, and this just simply states that they have either a 2-year or a 3-year term, because they're serving out terms of former board members. And I would like to also point out that they are in the process of adding one more person to the CVB. Hence, we'll probably ask you one more time to add that member or ratify that member and their term when that process is complete. So tonight, this action simply assigns terms to people that you've previously appointed, and they are listed in front of you.
All right. Thank you. You've heard the introduction. Any comments or questions? Would there be a motion then to ratify the terms of the Visitors Committee members?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Item D then is precincts and polling places. Mr. Kessel?
Thank you. I got a little ahead of myself. What this item does is it changes our precincts from the current system where we have many to a process of recognizing the 2 legislative districts as they exist in our community and as they have been redrawn per the special session of the North Dakota Legislature. So we will change from, I believe, 7 precincts down to 2, and they would have the exact same lines as our legislative districts. The polling places don't need to be decided this evening, but yet before the next election, we'll make a request to do so. I've been in contact with Ms. Haig from Stark County, and likely it'll be the Armory and the Badlands Activity Center as election centers. But this evening, it's changing our precincts from 7 to 2.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kessel. This is the second reading of this proposed ordinance number 1435. If there are any members from the public that would like to comment, you may do so now. Just step to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments regarding this proposed ordinance. There's no one from the public that would like to comment. Any comments or questions by commissioners? Is there a motion regarding this item then?
Mr. President, move to approve ordinance 1435.
Second.
We have the motion to approve and the second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. Go to item D, or item E now, zoning ordinance change regarding campgrounds. Mr. Colling, would you like to introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. The proposed ordinance is making some changes to the manner in which the city regulates campgrounds. They're fairly small changes, but they are intended to make certain that our campgrounds that are permitted as campgrounds do not, in fact, run as man camps. You'll recall we recently passed, the City Commission recently passed an ordinance regulating man camps, and this ordinance is essentially to follow up on that and make sure that any properties that are used as man camps do comply with our ordinance regarding that. The specific language of the ordinance states that for agricultural zoned areas, campgrounds would not be permitted as a matter of right, but would be permitted only by special use permit. So any landowner wanting to operate a campground would have to go in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission, apply for a special use permit, and then ultimately come before this body and request the same. The proposed ordinance also states that campgrounds, as they are defined in our ordinances, are intended for recreational use, for tourist use, and not for the purposes of man camps. It does contain a time limitation in there stating that any person occupying a campground would only be able to do so on a particular site for a period of 14 days. The 14 days is somewhat open to negotiation, I guess, interpretation. On talking with Mr. Corton, he was more comfortable with a period of 30 days, so they would have 1 month to occupy that site. I have received a couple of phone calls from others in the community who make the point that sometimes you'll have someone who will come into a campground, a legitimate campground, and stay for the summer, and they may be there for 2 or 3 months. So the specific time period that you would want to incorporate in there, I would leave to your discretion. But I do believe in order to make sure the campgrounds operate legitimately as campgrounds, that there should probably be a time limit of some sort in there. Mr. President?
Thank you, Mr. Colling. Have you assigned an ordinance number to this?
Mr. President, this would be ordinance 1437.
Okay, 1437. While the commission would be considering the first reading of ordinance 1437, but at this time, we would invite public comment regarding 1437. Again, all you need to do is step to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments regarding this proposed ordinance. Anybody from the public?
Yes, I'm Bert Lombard, married to Bertha Pugh, who bought the Camp on the Heart back in '86. We were married 4 years ago. We've been licensed as a trailer park campground since '86, with 86 sites on the license. And in reading the proposed phraseology here, it appears that this is intended for temporary recreational housing of a tourist, traveler, or vacationer in nature, and shall not permit any temporary lodging with a vehicle, etc., with a limitation of 14 days. I think that there's a little bit of a concern here. And I've made a list that I'll submit after I go over this here, of some of the types of customers that are not necessarily temporary recreational housing tourists, travelers, or vacation in nature. We've had several visiting nurses, therapists, doctors, students, who are not just going to be there for a 14-day period. We've even had persons waiting to close on a new home. One of these this past summer was here most of the summer, and it was the president of one of our local banks. other people purchasing homes, people having repairs to be completed on their homes right here in Dickinson. Some were as a result of the tornado, others were just having major repairs done. There have been various safety instructors that come in and they're here for a longer period than 14 days, usually for most of the summer. There are various trades of construction workers. Many of these are providing services to the city of Dickinson and the county through various regular businesses here in Dickinson, whether they're laying fiber optic cables or other matters. And then there are persons from out of town that come in and they have unexpected medical problems that create extended stays, or they have to take care of children or grandchildren because of medical or other problems. And the list goes on and on. No one ever knows what the future might bring. This is a reason for concern if there's a limitation, especially if it's held strictly for a tourist situation. RV parks or campgrounds provide a viable, necessary component to the city's attractions. It also can provide suitable, pleasant, and alternative places for people to stay, especially if all of the other forms of lodging are full. And we know that's a major problem in the city. I feel, in my opinion, restrictions imposed on campgrounds may only detract from the city's attractiveness for all of the above and others who might be desirous to explore other possibilities in our area. So I think these are some of the things that we need to consider. It not only affects the campgrounds and the people that may be in them, but it affects people. They could be selling RVs, servicing them, MDU, a multitude of services and businesses right here in the town. So you have a great economic impact that if times are cut down and restricted, especially on campgrounds that are set up properly. I know part of the concern is proper water, proper sewer, things that are set up right. Now, if we're concerned, and I believe some of the concern is over some that might just try to grab a quick buck, okay? That shouldn't be. I don't want to see Dickinson become like some of the boom towns have been. This is where we live. We want it to be right. We want it to grow right. It's tough when it grows fast. But sometimes we try to do what we can do. You know, most of your workers that come in, they work hard. All they want to do is come home and sleep. But you're going to get maybe 1 or 2% that comes in with a boom town, you know, for lack of better words, a little undesirable. And if we have people trying to make a fast buck, all we really have is a code enforcement problem. That's all it really is. The campgrounds and the campground owners are doing what they're supposed to do. Further restrictions are really not going to solve a problem that's out there. I have a list here that I just went over, if you'd like to have that for consideration for later.
Sure.
Would that help?
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else wish to comment?
Mr. President, Commissioners, thank you for your time. First of all, I want to go back to make my case, old business. I think you all are doing an excellent job, and you deserve a pay raise.
You're out of order. You have to tell us, you have to state your name
Oh, I'm
first.
sorry.
And then you can tell us.
Then you can tell, okay, I'm Ted Broughton, I own a campground here in town. And getting back there, I think you're doing a wonderful job and you deserve a pay raise. I really do, honestly. I know what you guys do, and I wouldn't do it for $1 million. Well, 1 year I'd do it for $1 million. But having said that,
For the record, our pay raise is a lot less than $1 million.
Well-
okay,
with inflation, it'll probably get to that. I have two problems with the ordinance as written. One is, as a businessman, I have a real problem. Mr. Altman, if someone came to you and said, you can sell investments to this group of people and only this many. You know, you can sell cabinets, Mr. President, to this many companies and only that many. You know, all four of you are in business for yourself, and what you're saying is you'll limit us in how long we'll let people live, And what type of, do I have to get a piece of paper out and say, are you a tourist? Are you sure you're a tourist? Do you have any classification that say you're a tourist? You know, it's so arbitrary, it doesn't make sense to me. I have lived here all my life, pretty much. I grew up on a farm 40 miles south of here. And if it's to be restricted, it should be restricted by us, because we're the ones that it's going to hurt the most if we bring undesirable people in and they do undesirable things. It'll put us out of business, just like any one of you will put out of business. What we have in Dickinson is a housing problem, and desperate times demand desperate measures. Unfortunately, we're in those times right now. And if you want to limit things, I could see it maybe in Florida or someplace down south where people would live in a camper forever. But I don't know a single person that's living in my campground that when they were a kid said, you know, when I grow up, I'm going to move to North Dakota and live in a camper in the winter. You know, that's my point. The winter alone limits most of these people. I mean, it's not, the most desirable location. But what is our problem in Dickinson? One is availability. And if you can find a place, can you afford it? For a vast majority of people, neither one of those are an option. And some people can afford it and they choose not to. They choose to save their money and go someplace else. A lot of people have a home someplace else and they're trying to make a living in Dickinson. For the people like Commissioner Frenzel and Steiner and President Johnson, you've lived through the last boom. And you know what comes after a boom? A bust. I thought I was going to get rich in real estate the last boom, and I believed all the stories they told. Yes, I know that oil will be around 30, 40, 50 years, but this build-out is just a few years. It could be done. In fact, in a month we could be done if they come out and they say, you know what, fracking is illegal. You can't do it anymore. This boom is done. It's over. But let's just say it goes for a number of years. Okay, so we bring in all these contractors, all these developers, we build all these houses, all these apartments, now we have a surplus. And what's going to happen when you have a surplus? When the prices drop, they don't drop a little bit. They fall like Las Vegas. And, you know, the advantage of RVs, manufactured housing, and other man camps, which I'm not opposed to, in the right location, is when the boom turned to a bust, what started as an empty field will turn back into an empty field, and your house, Mr. Altman, won't drop in value as much. I mean, it's going to drop, but not as much, because we won't have that huge a surplus. One of the things, I'm just about done here, is I took a few minutes this afternoon, and it wasn't that many minutes, and I called a few of the residents that are staying in North Park right now. And I'd like to put a face on some of the people. Everybody that's living in an RV, would you stand up right now? Thank you. So if we put that ordinance into place, those people right there will be on the street in 2 weeks. I don't think that's what we want. At least that's not what I want. I can sell my land and make a good profit. But I can't find a home for them in short order. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Broughton.
Mr. Colin, could I get a little clarification? I know that on Mr. Broughton's property, it's zoned mobile home residential. And so this ordinance would not affect North Park or Heartland Homes, as I understand it.
That's correct, Commissioner Olson. This property only pertains to campgrounds. It does not pertain to properties that are zoned as mobile home courts or mobile home subdivisions.
And so even though Mr. Broughton rents spots to campers and RVs, because his land is zoned mobile home residential, he doesn't fall under the same guidelines as a traditional campground.
That's correct. Campgrounds are regulated under a different section than mobile homes or mobile home parks. So this ordinance would not pertain to properties that are zoned mobile home.
So no limit on length of stays or any of the regulations that we're looking at here.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Rod Shopper. Most of you guys know me. I think all of you do. I own Rough Rider RVs. I was just reading this and just had a quick question. Where did 1437 come from? Why did it come about? What was the driving force?
Mr. Colling or Mr. Kessel, would you take a shot at that?
I'll take a shot at it. Mr. Corton may want to comment as well, but I believe the genesis of the ordinance was intended so that we do not have campgrounds that are functionally operating as crew camps. Mr. Corton may wish to further comment.
Mr. President, Commission, last week I was proposed 2 questions on campground sites. After looking at the code, I realized that our zoning code is vague, and with that, under our zoning code, we briefly described what a campground was, but it was a permitted use in the agricultural district. Based upon that, that was contrary to everything that I had been told and the way that we had looked at campgrounds. So subsequent to that, I talked to Mr. Colling and said, I think there's a confusion factor in the code. It'd be left up to me as the zoning administrator to make a determination. I have one applicant that was looking at coming in and challenging my decision because we were applying campgrounds the same as we would do manufactured home parks due to the lack of clarity within our zoning code. So since then, we've adopted an ordinance and provided some additional criteria for you to consider tonight. The main thing that I am looking at that I think we need to do is we need to make sure that any campground at least goes through a more thorough review process, special use permit. And that would be the main thing that I'm looking at tonight. But the crux of the matter is that it's vague, it's left up for interpretation, and the last thing I think as a community that we want to, as much time as we spent through our crew camp ordinance, is to somehow allow a campground to function as a crew camp facility, and that's what we're trying to clarify tonight.
Okay. So what campgrounds are within the city of Dickinson's jurisdiction? What is considered a campground? What are their names, I guess? What does this affect that's currently here?
If you like, Mr. President, I can answer that.
Yeah.
As far as I know, we don't have any, and what I want to avoid is starting a unnecessary process. So that's why I'm proposing that we change the ordinance tonight to have a more thorough review. As far as I know, we don't have any campgrounds in our extraterritorial zone or within our city limits.
What about Camp of the Heart?
Camp of the Heart, that one there, I guess technically I would have to see, I'd have to really look at it. That was done years ago. That may be considered, very well be considered as a campground. That's probably about the only one that I could think of offhand for that.
How about
The difference between
Patterson Lake? Ed, what's that considered?
We also have one out of Patterson Lake
Yeah.
campground out there too, same thing.
Mr. President, if I may,
Please, Steve.
just for clarification, Camp on the Heart is considered in city limits. It's one of our areas of protection and our area of inspection also. I'm not sure with North Park Trailer Court if there isn't an aspect of that that is actually in fact considered a campground.
Unlicensed.
There's a portion of North Park that is licensed as a campground also, which I think,
The zone is a mobile home. Unlicensed.
so there was like a double issue there, actually.
Mr. President, with respect to the definitions, the way campground is defined is a campground does not allow manufactured homes or mobile homes. It's specifically just for tents or RVs. Manufactured home park, the ones that we normally have, like Heartland Homes and the rest, can't allow that. We have allowed them to have RVs or fifth wheel and the rest by omission, but the difference between a mobile home park and a campground is a mobile home park will allow mobile homes or manufactured homes. A campground does not. And that's the difference between the two.
And this, excuse me a minute. This ordinance is intended just to deal with those that are defined as campgrounds and not mobile home parks.
That is correct. Our current ordinance is very clear on manufactured home parks. So I don't think that we need to define that in any way. That's very clear in the ordinance. Now, the campgrounds themselves are kind of vague, and I have always, and since I've started here, I've always looked at if somebody came in and wanted to do a campground, then they should do it similar to what our requirements are for a manufactured home park. Now, that issue, I think, should be probably ferreted a little bit more. My recommendation would be tonight that at least we look at the issue of requiring a special use permit for any new campgrounds, and then go back maybe through the planning commission and hear all these issues and come back with a more detailed ordinance. That would make sense to me.
Okay.
That was the point I was getting at, is first we need to define, before we get too far into this, what are the campgrounds, not only in city, within the city, but within the city's jurisdiction that's going to be enforced by this. We got to first identify them so that we all are under the understanding of what they are, so we all know what we are. Burt is actually zoned as a manufactured housing, correct?
No, actually,
You got to come to the podium so your mic picks up your comments.
I needed, Burt Lombard, Camp on the Heart, needed a point of clarification. When the campground was purchased, it was a mobile home park, and I believe that it is zoned as mobile home park. That's why I have a question as to the definition there, why would this would be any different than what you considered for Heartland and/or North Park?
And is that why none showed up on your radar when you looked through, Dickinson to see if there were any campgrounds? If they're zoned mobile, then you wouldn't have had one.
Yeah, the difference between the two is a campground per our zoning code is specific. It says that it's tents or it can be used as RVs. You could have that. It's meant to be very temporary in nature. A manufactured home park, or mobile home if you want to use that term, allows manufactured homes. So if they have an entitlement or permission, past ones that allows them to have manufactured homes on the site, then I would consider that as a manufactured home park, a vested manufactured home park. Is that the case? I don't know offhand. But if they don't have any and that's never been part of their entitlement, then it'll be classified as a campground per our zoning code.
Well, there were mobile homes there. There is one mobile home still there. And that we need clarification on. I think that's part of what we need when you finalize this ordinance, so there isn't a great vagueness, because we may know what the intention is now, but later on, if there's a reinterpretation, this is where there could be concerns and problems. And we don't need that. We're on a tight ship. And this is part, I think, of what Rod's trying to find out, because it affects the whole community, not just there. But I was concerned when two were mentioned is not a problem, and then it seemed like Camp on the Hat might have been singled out a little differently. I'd like to have further clarification of that as it goes on, if I may, please.
Rod with Rough Rider RVs again. I do want to be somewhat, I guess I'd like to say, I'm not sure if Ed did this or who did, but as far as tie-downs and things and places to go in cases of storms, and that's great stuff. And it's stuff that does need to be answered. People's health and safety, we're not definitely looking to try to jeopardize that. Some of this stuff is really good. The only thing else I'd like to comment on is I'm a little bit worried about the 14 days also, under E on number 4. And I guess the big thing is right now, just for an example, if you called the Dickinson Optimist Club and asked them if the last basketball tournament they threw had the same attendance as past years, they're going to tell you no. And the reason being is, they can't get rooms. People coming from out of town are having problems getting rooms. Doesn't matter what event it is, it doesn't matter. We're having that problem, we all know it. If we're going to put 14 days restrictions on the parks as far as the RVs go in the future or present, are we going to kick everybody out of the motel rooms after 14 days? Because there's no room in them? Because they're man camps by your guys' definition. So I think the 14 days has just got to go, guys. It's just got to go. Where would it stop? So, thank you, gentlemen. I think you guys have done a nice job with this. I myself, if you guys wanted to include myself in some of this discussion outside of this meeting, I'd be more than happy to sit down with you guys. Thank you.
Okay. Excuse me, no, you're fine. I see someone else about to come up, but we have a timetable agenda that we have to go over to. I don't think it'll take us too long, but it starts at 5 o'clock and we're already a few minutes late. So we'll suspend discussion here for a few minutes, go to the timetable agenda, and the first item we have there is a public hearing regarding a rezoning petition. And Mr. Curtin, we have 4 of these. I think they're all yours, so will you take us through these items?
Mr. President, Commissioners, this rezone petition is for a request for Cooks Meadow Hill Second Edition from R1 to R2 and R3 for Block 1. Specifically, R3 would be for lots 1 through 3, and for R2 would be lots 4 through 10. The site is located westerly of 10th Avenue West and northerly of Cooks Meadow Hills First Edition. The Planning and Zoning Commission heard this last month and recommended approval along with City staff.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cruton. Mr. Coley, this ordinance number what?
Mr. President, this will be ordinance 1438.
1438, okay. Well, at this time, we would declare the public hearing open regarding the first reading here of this ordinance. Anybody that wishes to comment may do so. Just step to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. Anybody wish to comment on 1438?
Mr. President, Mike Mouse, are you going to take public comments under 14F? Because if you are, I'll sit down and wait until that comes up.
Well, it would be highly unusual, but just for you, Mr. Mouse, we'll do that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Is there anybody else that would like to comment on 1438? Not, we'll declare the public hearing closed. Any comments by city commissioners? Is there a motion regarding the first reading of 1438? Either to approve or disapprove.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have the motion to approve and the second. Any other discussion? Hearing no discussion, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. Mr. Catan, would you go to the second item there, the 505 one?
Mr. President, Commission, the next item is a rezone petition request for Lion subdivision. This would be a rezone from R1 to R2 for the property described in your colored map that is attached with your board packets. The site is located easterly of 4th Avenue East and southerly of 40th Street East. The Planning and Zoning Commission and city staff recommend approval. The attached plat that it's overlaid for the zoning district that's included in your packets, that will be their plat if they come back after the rezone has been approved, or if it is approved. The applicant has chose to come with a meets and bounds description as depicted in the resolution, and then if that's approved, then they're going to come back later and replat the property according to the rezone that's in front of you tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Catan. Mr. Colling, this is 1439?
That's correct, Mr. President.
All right. Okay, so we'll declare the public hearing open. Anyone that would like to comment regarding 1439, step to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. There's no one that would like to comment. We'll declare the public hearing closed. Any comments by city commissioners? Would there be a motion regarding the first reading of 1439?
Motion to approve first reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Mr. Catan, would you continue with the 510 item?
The next item is a Vaughan rezone. This is a rezone petition for the Vaughan subdivision from ag to rural residential. The site is located northerly of 35th Street Southwest and is approximately 1.5 miles easterly of the intersection of 21st Street East and 10th Avenue East. The Planning and Zoning Commission and city staff recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Catan. We'll invite public comment regarding this proposed ordinance. I'm assuming it's 1440. And so anyone that wishes to comment on 1440 may do so. Step to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. There's no one that wishes to comment. Would there be a motion regarding the first reading of ordinance 1440?
Motion to approve.
Do we have the second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. Mr. Catan, would you continue with the 515 item?
This special use permit is for an office use in a residence in an R3 zone. The property is located at 509 3rd Street Avenue West. The prior use of the building was a bed and breakfast establishment, and Weston Solutions is seeking approval to allow their employees the ability to live and work in the same building. This item was heard at the last Planning Commission, and both the Planning Commission and city staff recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Catan. It doesn't, Mr. Coley, it doesn't say anything about a public hearing here regarding this.
It doesn't, Mr. President, but it should.
It should.
Hearing is required for a special use permit.
Okay, good. This time then we'll declare the public hearing open regarding this special use permit for Weston Solutions. Anyone that would like to comment regarding this item may do so. Step to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. If no one that wishes to comment, we'll declare the public hearing closed. Any comments or questions by city commissioners? Would there be a motion then regarding the special use permit?
Mr. President, move to approve the special use permit as requested.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, then we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll go back to discussing the proposed zoning change regarding the campgrounds. There was a lady towards the back that wanted to comment. Why don't you come up to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments.
Hi, my name's Tina Walker. I live at the North Park RV Park campground. Sorry. Anyways, I am a single mom. I am up here from Arizona, and I'm trying to establish a place for my son and I to live. And he's in school, doing very well. He's in hockey and doing wonderful. But in order, if we have to move in 14 days, I would not be able to take my RV out of here, let alone, I mean, I'm struggling as it is, but I'm not one to ask for help. But I just think it would not be, it would be horrible for my son and I having to be out on the street and gosh, we're over 15,000 miles away from home already. My brother is here, but I'm not going to go live with him because I'm just not like that. But it would be, and when I got the call from him today, from Ted, it was a scary thing because I have no other place to go. And therefore, I noticed in the newspaper, the poverty level is also getting lower here in North Dakota. That was Sunday's paper, I do believe. So, and I don't want to be there. I don't want to be homeless. I don't want my son to be homeless either. So, and that's all I got to say.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Walker.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name's Maureen Bratton. I'm Ted's wife. I got kind of choked up. I know that gal. I just had a few comments to, I don't blame you for looking at building some sort of ordinance. I'm much about rules and understanding that. I think Bert did a very good job. I wasn't even thinking of all the types of people that he was mentioning, but we've had people like that at North Park. Right now, most of the individuals are working in the energy industry. And I think we need to define, and like Rod Shopper said, where do you draw the line at the 14 days? We are a Good Sam travel RV park. We keep sites open in the summer for that. We want to maintain our rating with them. We want to maintain North Park as a recreational campground to draw people to Western North Dakota so they can enjoy, the beauty and the things to do out here, even after the boom. So we've kept that in mind. We continue to make improvements with the RV tourist trade in mind too, but we're not going to turn these people away that need a place to live. And we are meeting a need. We employ 10 people, and so by cutting our business, drastically, we put some people out of work. So, something to think about too. I was just going over the demographics of the people. We keep a list of the people that are in the sites and their names. Approximately 2/3 of the people are married. A third, at least, are husband and wife or a very close couple. Maybe a third is single. Those people have, many of them have homes elsewhere, watch the economy dry up elsewhere. They're very, very sharp people, and like I think Bert said, they just want to have a safe place to call home, and they are, being involved in this community. But they're members of the West River Community Center. Some are members of churches. Doing a lot of commerce here, and I think, as Ted mentioned, it's a great solution because the boom will be gone eventually. The RVs can go away, and we're not stuck with a housing glut. So I just really think it's a good option. I did bring along also our 2012 trailer park / campground license renewals. We are licensed as a campground with this North Dakota Department of Health. So I think that's where some definitions need to be, meted out. I do understand, and I feel that you don't want to see, adjacent agricultural properties all of a sudden lined up with various sorts of skidders, where they just skid in a house or just throw a bunch of RVs around and not having proper water and sewer. But I did want you to know, for sake of maybe defining things, as you look at building this ordinance, that we, and I think Cap in the Heart and Heartland Village is also with the North Dakota Department of Health licensed as a campground as well. So we would just ask that you bear that in mind when you write the definitions. That would be helpful. And I just thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Broughton. Anybody else wish to comment?
Hello. I'm Valerie Fugit, the general manager at Heartland. So I just want to clarify a couple of things listening to everything. The intent is not at this point to change anything with how North Park, or let's say Camp on the Heart or Heartland operates currently. Is that correct?
Here's what I think the basic attempt, or intent, not attempt, intent is that someone doesn't establish a business as a quote-unquote campground and then turn it into a crew camp. That's really the basic intent here. I think, from what I'm hearing, this is a more complicated than perhaps was assumed. And just to accomplish that basic intent, there probably has to be a fair amount of more work done here, understanding what we have in the community in terms of, existing businesses here, and also understanding what may be attempted by others in the future. So I think there's quite a bit of work to do here, but the basic intent is not to have someone skirt the issue and come up with a quote-unquote crew camp that evades the city's regulation. That's Mr. Cruton or Mr. Colleen, Mr. Kessel, anything different from what I just said there that...
Mr. President, I would agree with you on there. The intent on this putting together the ordinance was to provide some clarification, to try to distinguish or differentiate a campsite from a mobile home park or a manufactured home park. The main thing that, and I understand where you're coming as a commission, based upon the comments tonight. What I would hope to accomplish tonight, at a minimum, would be to at least make the land use an issue. In our agricultural district, it's a permitted use, and I would hope that at a minimum, we could at least, Section 2 of the code, move forward with that, require that as a special use permit, just the same as we would have currently in the manufactured home zoning destination and also in our I believe it's the general commercial requires that as a special use permit as well. That would cover the issue of at least having a reviewing body and staff an opportunity to review that. And I think that's at a minimum that I would ask that we could try to accomplish tonight. The language on 14 days or limiting in the rest, that might be a better option if we bring that through the Planning Commission, let them have the opportunity as a recommending body to have a public hearing to address those situations and then come back with a more complete, more thorough ordinance. I would be in favor of that, and I would hope as a commission you might consider that tonight.
Okay, I have a question, Mr. Coley. When I read this, I made the assumption that items 4 and 5 under campground, since they're underlined, are all new language, and everything else is language that exists in our current city code.
Mr. President, Commissioners, that's true for Section 1 of this ordinance. Section 2 of this ordinance changes the schedule of permitted uses and special permitted uses. That would be language that would be changed if you approve this ordinance as well.
So Section 2 is new language?
Well, it's not language that would be codified into the code. It just changes a campground from a use permitted by right to a use permitted by special permit in an agricultural district. So it changes the table of permitted uses.
Okay.
Mr. President, that is a table. It's a chart for people to refer to instead of specifically calling it out in text form. You go to a chart and it lists all the land uses on the left-hand side, and on the top portion, like you would have as a spreadsheet, on the top portion it lists each zoning district.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do is change at a minimum the agricultural designation from a permitted use to a special use. That would be referenced in Section 2.
Right. You know, I understand that. What I don't understand is why this language, or, you know, when we look at a proposed ordinance change, generally we know what the changes are. They're either lined out or they're underlined. If Section 2, how would we know as commissioners, especially someone as slow as me, on Section 2 that's changing things? How do I know that?
Mr. President, what Section 2 does is make a change to a table that's incorporated into your code. This is a copy Mr. Kessel is holding up of that table. And we could reproduce that table in ordinance form and outline the specific changes, but there's actually only one letter in that table that is actually changing, and that changes campgrounds under an agricultural district from a P to an S.
Okay, so
And
that's
the only
change.
change for Section 2.
Yeah, but I mean, my point is, how did I know that when I read this ordinance? The only thing I really concentrated on were points 4 and 5, because those were the changes. That's what I'm wondering.
Okay. And we'll have to look through how to identify those things and make them clearer in what we report to you. And we'll try to do that in the future on ordinances that we produce that are table changes.
Yeah, see, I mean, even in the memo, it doesn't point that out. Now, I'm sure my three associate commissioners here all caught that, but I didn't. So, I mean, so what you're saying, Mr. Corton, is actually if we struck point 4 right now for certain, but kept Section 2, and I'm not so sure point 5 isn't okay the way it's written, that that would be acceptable for first reading.
That would be my recommendation based upon the testimony tonight. I think it's, you know, we're trying to clarify the issue, and in some ways, bringing up an issue, it gets muddied in the waters until you've had a chance to really go through everything. So probably for all the sakes, to avoid any unnecessary anxiety and the rest, I think that would make the most sense to keep Section 2 in there, which is referring to the table, the zoning table, to change agriculture from a permitted use to a special use permit. Keep number 5, which is referring to our crew camp ordinance, and just further specifying that, and then omit number 4, as you have talked about. And then, if it pleases you as a commission, then I could bring this issue up after consultation with Mr. Colleen, and we could have this as one, and bring it to the Planning Commission, address these issues, prevent alternatives and options for it, and then ultimately come to you with a clean revised ordinance for adoption purposes.
I'm kind of thinking back to our discussions over the past couple of years regarding liquor ordinances and the liquor licenses. And I remember, on our books where it was the old Queen City Club property was written right in and had specific comments about it. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't consider something similar. First of all, identifying all the existing properties that are either now campgrounds or have a campground aspect to them, and maybe just very clearly writing in to our ordinance that I don't want to use the word grandfathered, but I mean that they're defined. At least I think you should consider that. Yeah, I know what you're trying to do. What you're trying to do on a go-forward basis is to make sure whether it's an existing campground or a new one being built, it doesn't turn into a crew camp. And I don't think there's anybody here that objects to us trying to make sure we control that. And I don't think there's anyone sitting up here that, wants to throw a single mom out of an existing trailer park or campground right now. I mean, we don't want our ordinances to do that.
Mr. President, I would agree with that. I think what we're looking for is just a true separation of a man camp versus an RP or campground. I think the community wants us to find that difference so that we can, control what we perceive or what the public perceives as a man camp. And I think it's excellent advice that you guys gave us. Absolutely, we're not here to shut you guys down or move you out of town or anything like that. You guys have done an excellent job. In fact, you're needed in this community. So we're, but I think that's basically what it is we don't want to see a man camp in a mobile home or an RV park without the city being able to make sure that that's what we want or meets our underwriting here.
I'm sorry, we've had quite a discussion with you at the podium.
No, that's fine. That's fine. It's all good. No, I think I understand what you're trying to do. I think all of us are just concerned that, like North Park, we have quite a few families that have been there for a while, and that's their home base, and we just want to be sure that nothing that's decided tonight is going to affect them or our operation in that way.
I don't think that's the city staff's intent, but at the same time, they don't want a loophole in the law that's going to allow someone to call it a campground and it turns out to be a crew camp. And I think most of us up here agree that that Dickinson perhaps is going to need some crew camp facilities. I mean, and for the reasons Mr. Broughton brought out about, the oil industry historically is boom and bust. At some point, even if it doesn't bust, if it's fully developed, then demand for housing will go down. So we do need a certain amount of temporary housing, and crew camps provide a pretty good alternative to that. But we want to do those things well. We want to put them in the right place in our community, and the city, I think, needs to be able to permit them and regulate them. You can go to other communities in western North Dakota and you can see many examples of this not having been done very well. And because the oil impact has been a little later in coming to Dickinson, our sister cities to the north had to deal with these issues much sooner than we did. We have the opportunity to observe and learn from what's taken place north of us, and I think that's what this group is trying to do. So,
Thank you.
President
Thank you.
Johnson, if I may, I have a question for her.
Oh, Valerie? Ma'am?
Yeah, ma'am?
I think Mr. Kessel, would you take a question from Mr.
Oh,
Kessel?
sure, yeah.
I had a nice conversation with Bert this afternoon, and he informed me that the state licensed him as a campground/mobile home park. Are you licensed similarly?
We're the same thing. We're zoned as manufactured home, but there's a portion that is licensed as an RV park/campground.
Okay, so the whole
A certain
park
amount
is...
of- A certain amount of lots are.
So you do have a portion of your park that's designated campground and another part that's both?
RV park/campground, correct. And then another part that's specifically manufactured home.
Okay, okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Mr. Broughton, are you similarly licensed from the state?
Yes, I have two separate licenses.
Okay. And do you have any that are they completely separate? You have a campground portion and a mobile home portion, or do you have part that can accept either?
That's one of the requirements, is they do keep them separate. They don't want them mixed in.
Okay.
I mean, it's possible to do that, obviously, because RVs will move in and out quite fast, but yeah, that's the intent, and that's what we do too.
Okay.
It's two different, lifestyles, really.
Yeah.
Mr. Frenzel?
But your entire property is zoned mobile home park.
Correct, manufactured housing, correct. The entire one. They do allow it.
So if you were to give up the permit that you've got now, the license you've got now, the whole thing could still be a mobile home park.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It wouldn't take, the infrastructure is very similar for either. That's why it's so easy to convert a manufactured housing community into a campground, because, the water, sewer, and electricity is all in the same place, specific, close.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All of the providers that have presented today are zoned mobile home park. But I wanted to clarify that, because that was a point that I learned today. And President Johnson, you're exactly correct. We perceived a hole in our ordinance that would allow a crew camp differently than we would like it. And so that is our attempt, is to close that loophole. And we'll bring back language different that may do that in a better way.
Okay, so if I understand your comments, when you were drafting this ordinance, we overlooked that the state also has a role here in licensing, or Mr. Colling, you didn't overlook that?
We didn't overlook it,
Okay.
Mr. President. It's one of the frustrating things when you're dealing with multiple political subdivisions, is that the state may license somebody as a campground who the city would not recognize as a campground. We have different definitions and different ways in which our city ordinances are going to be enforced. And just because somebody has a state license as a campground does not mean that the city, under our ordinances, that we would recognize them as a campground. For all of the mobile home parks, manufactured home parks that we have in the city, the three of them, those are zoned mobile home and would not be affected by this ordinance. This ordinance does not apply to them. It applies only to campgrounds who are specially permitted campgrounds under our zoning ordinance. So, for whatever it's worth, I can offer that clarification.
Okay. As we work on this ordinance, maybe we could can we actually say that in there, that it doesn't apply to mobile home parks?
I think we can, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And I should say, too, I concur with what Mr. Corton said. The more important part of this ordinance, at least from a city perspective, is Section 2 and changing the table of the permitted uses. If we change that land use portion of it, I think we get 98% of what this ordinance was intended to do. The additional stuff on Section 1 is more intended to provide additional clarification for what we consider as a campground. And if the commission were to approve just Section 2 of this proposed ordinance, I think that gets us 98% of the way there for what staff wish to accomplish.
Under campgrounds, .5 though, I mean, if we eliminated .4 and .5 became number 4, do you see that as creating a problem here for the existing businesses that are represented?
No, I would not consider that to be creating a problem. I think that language is appropriate.
Okay. Yes?
Rod Stropper with Rough Rider RVs again. Is 3913 done, written in stone in the books?
Well, nothing's ever written in stone.
I mean, not to, we might as well do this right if we're doing it now.
Ten Commandments.
Under 3913-008 prohibited housing types, you guys might as well throw park models in there. And get it
We
done.
might as well throw what?
Park models.
Park model?
Built to a whole different code than manufactured homes, mobile homes, or RVIA vehicles. It's a whole different code. And I think that's your guys' intent, at least I would look at it, okay? We might as well do this and get it done right. The second thing is, well, that would take care of that, never mind. I think if you guys did that, the second question I would have is, does the Park and Rec with Patterson Lake fall into your guys' jurisdiction? I believe it does, the 2 miles is in it, right? So they are affected. Has anybody talked to James Kramer about that? Has anybody let him know that they got to kick their people out after 14 days if we do this? Or are we going to get rid of that completely for sure?
I think
That's done?
it's done, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, I would still think out of courtesy, maybe let him know what's going on. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Burt Lombard, Camp on the Heart. Just as a suggestion, I think it might make people feel more comfortable, as one suggestion was to actually list the existing mobile home campgrounds that are in existence in the city right now when you write this ordinance, or whether you use a grandfather clause or some other term that would be similar to it. And I think that would help for future redefinitions, if there is a redefinition at some later date down the road. Just food for thought down the road. The other thing is, if I could be of any assistance to help, whatever. I'm in Arizona, but Sean has my cell phone number. I had to fly up yesterday through that blizzard down there in Denver, so. But that's how important it is to us, as well as to the city.
Yeah, well, we thank you for taking the time and the expense to travel back to Dickinson and share your concerns.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Again, just, the way the process works, first reading is, kind of alerts the public that there are changes being considered. And only when you pass second reading are those changes a done deal. Here's what I'm going to suggest we do tonight, is that we do pass first reading, but that we strike that .4 under campgrounds, and the existing .5 become .4. And we pass first reading that way. Now, before we act on second reading, we'll schedule another public hearing at the next meeting, and we will not schedule any action on second reading. And we'll give Mr. Colling and Mr. Curtin a couple of weeks to think about all that was said here tonight. For example, the ideas of writing a little history now into the ordinance. See what they think about that, and if they want to take a shot at crafting some language there. But any changes that are made will have another hearing. Okay, so people here in the industry and other concerned citizens will get a chance to weigh in. But to get the process started, that would be my suggestion. Now, are there any objections from the public if we got the process started that way? Well, I think what we're hearing mostly was, that section 4, the 14 days, and it's, first of all, campgrounds. I also heard loud and clear, campgrounds are used for many, many different things besides just tourism, and visitors, okay? So we'd strike that, but then we would leave everything else intact for first reading. Does anybody object to that? All right. How about my fellow commissioners, or would you be on board with that action?
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner?
would we need to include in that motion that we add section 2?
No, section 2 is already there.
It's okay, even though change is there, you don't have to approve. Okay.
Yeah. So, if we're on board with that, Mr. Colling, do we need a motion that strikes 4 and changes 5 to 4?
Mr. President, if you had a motion to approve ordinance 1437, striking a proposed paragraph E4, that would be sufficient.
I would make that motion.
There we have, Mr. Altman, you're very articulate. Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries, and I want to thank all the members of the public for your comments and your insights. Thank you very much, and thank you for taking your time to attend tonight's meeting. Now, you certainly don't have to go. There's more to come, so if you can certainly stay. Okay. We'll move on to recycling site compliance ordinance, and that is now item F on our agenda, and this is a first reading. Mr. Colling, would you like to explain this?
Mr. President, I believe Mr. Kessel is taking this one.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Kessel.
President Johnson and Commission, this is a follow-up to the report that I provided at the last Commission meeting. The ordinance is intended to establish a infraction for anybody who would dump materials in recycling sites other than those that we're trying to recycle. Unfortunately, in our recycling sites, we are receiving a lot of materials that make it very difficult for us to remove. They're not things that we intended to collect, and a great deal of staff time is being spent removing those items. We have concerns being expressed about the fire hazard that the tree limbs and such that is accumulated there. And so, in light of those difficulties, we are requesting that you establish an ordinance that makes an infraction out of depositing materials that we're not trying to collect. An infraction is punishable by up to a $500 fine per offense. And if there's any questions, I'll certainly try to take those.
Okay. The ordinance number, Mr. Colling?
Mr. President, this would be ordinance 1441.
1441, okay. Well, before we ask for commissioner questions, we'll ask if there's anyone from the public that wishes to comment regarding proposed ordinance 1441. If so, you can step to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. Anybody for 1441? All right, there's no one for 1441. Any comments or questions by commissioners?
Mr. President, I'd just like to make a note of it now that when we do our second reading and final passage, that we make a note that we route this to the police department. I think they're the ones that are going to be out there doing this here for us, so at least they'll be aware that we do have an ordinance supporting it.
Okay. I have a question to where it's under section 1, the last sentence. It says, any person who violates this section shall be guilty of an infraction and sentenced accordingly. Is this life in prison, or what is it here?
It is not life in prison,
Okay.
Mr. President. An infraction is punishable by up to a $500 fine, and that fine would be levied by a municipal court.
Should we say that, or?
You may choose to do so. It's not necessary in the ordinance, but
I would be in favor of mentioning the $500 fine for the simple reason that when the police officers get this here and they see that it's a $500 fine, with this and along with that note of a $500 fine, I think it's going to make them more aware that this is an issue in the community.
Mr. Mayor, one of the problems I can see with stated a $500 fine. If the ordinance or the state statute changes, and it's very likely to, we got to change the ordinance again. It isn't right. If the fine for an infraction goes to $650, we're not right.
What will our signage say? That's probably more important than anything to detract, is what will our signage say at the recycle sites?
Commissioner Oltman's, it'll be, we haven't determined what it'll exactly say, but more than likely it will say this last sentence here, but we will insert $500 as a maximum fine for an infraction.
Okay, well, I can't, maybe we've used this phrase before, this sentence before, but I mean, I just can't remember in other ordinances we've passed with, that had a penalty, I thought the penalty was more clearly defined, you know.
Mr. President, as always, it's your discretion whether or not you want to include that dollar amount in there. If you wish to do that, I certainly have no problem with that. An infraction is a standard offense under North Dakota state law, and all infractions are punishable by the same amount, or up to the same amount, I should say. But if you do wish to include a dollar amount in there, I certainly have no difficulty with that.
Well, why don't you think about it, you know. You know what an infraction is because you're an attorney, and what the penalty is. Those of us who aren't, don't. Any other comments? Would there be a motion regarding first reading?
So moved.
Second.
We have the motion and the second to approve first reading. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Oltman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. That brings us to the next item, which is the Cook Development Agreement. Mr. Colleen, are you introducing this one?
I am, Mr. President. Thank you. If you'll recall at the last City Commission meeting, you requested that we prepare a development agreement between the city and Cook Property Investments regarding the planting of a tree row buffer on the south end of Cook's First Edition, buffering the property that is owned to the south by Mr. Greg Leffer. A copy of the proposed agreement is in your packets, and I have had the opportunity to talk with both Mr. Cook and Mr. Leffer regarding this agreement. Mr. Cook has signed the agreement and provided the city with a certified check in the amount of $8,000 to secure his performance of the agreement. I believe at your desks as well, you have a copy of the estimate from Mr. Cook. He had a company from Bismarck prepare an estimate for him of what the cost of planting that tree row would be. His estimate came at $7,800. Obviously, Mr. Cook's security, a certified check that he provided would be sufficient to assure completion of that estimate. As I said, I did talk also with Mr. Leffer regarding the agreement, and it's my understanding he is not in concurrence with this agreement and does not agree with it. He is in the audience as well as his attorney. But as far as I understand it, there are three general objections that he has to the agreement. The first is that the security provided by Mr. Cook is not sufficient to assure completion of the required tree buffer. I believe Mr. Leffer has obtained an estimate for a tree row which is in the amount of $17,785. I went through both estimates in some detail earlier today, and there are differences between the estimates that have been submitted. Mr. Cook's estimate provides for planting 52 trees at an average per tree cost of $150. Mr. Leffers provides for planting 65 trees at an average per tree cost of $275. Both of these estimates provide for planting trees with a 12-foot spacing in between them. So obviously, Mr. Leffers is providing for a longer tree line than Mr. Cook's estimate provided for. If I have my math correct, the estimate for the Cook tree row is a total length of 624 feet, and the Leffer estimate would provide for a tree row of approximately 780 feet. Looking at the plat map for Cook's first edition, the south boundary of that plat that adjoins Mr. Leffer's property is 629 feet. I believe that Mr. Leffer's estimate is also including the, what would be the west boundary of his property, also adjoining Cook's first edition. And Mr. Cook's estimate just includes the south boundary of his property. So they're working off of slightly different tree row lengths. Additionally, one of the other objections that Mr. Leffer had expressed to me is that the development agreement does not provide for the species of tree to be used or the minimum height that a tree should have when it is planted. And I attempted to go back and review city commission minutes and zoning meeting minutes, and I did not find anything in those minutes or any discussion that we've had among city meetings where the city expressed any desire to limit the species of trees or provide that they can only be evergreen trees and not deciduous trees. That just wasn't a part of what had been discussed previously at city meetings. So in preparing the development agreement, I guess I did not view it within my authority to impose those conditions upon property owners when those conditions had not been expressed at prior meetings with the city. With respect to the tree row itself, I think I would defer those questions to either Mr. Soren or Mr. Corton. They have more experience with tree rows than I do and more expertise on that issue, so I'll defer to them. But in reviewing the matter as a whole, there's nothing that I can see that Mr. Cook has not complied with that the city has requested him to do. The development agreement that you have attempts to memorialize and record the prior discussions between the city and Mr. Cook regarding this issue. I believe it does so and is consistent with the prior discussions that we've had with Mr. Cook. City staff do recommend approval of the development agreement as it is presented, and I will, I guess, end my comments on that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Colleen. Mr. Mouse, would you like to comment now?
Mr. President, Commissioners, yes, I would. Thank you. I'm appearing on behalf of Greg and Les Leffer. First of all, we applaud your effort to get this in writing because originally the representations were made that the trees would be planted prior to any permits being issued. And in that subdivision, I don't know if permits have been issued, but I do know that there's 2 builders that have already started digging out there. So it's a good idea to get this in writing and set a deadline. I think one of the differences, if you look at Mr. Colling's agreement, I think it's a good agreement. But he references lots 6 through 13. 12 and 13 are on the west end of the property. The proposed tree row by Mr. Cook does not include any trees along the west side of the property. So we have that concern, and that explains the difference in the length. What we would like to encourage the city to do is put a little more specificity into the agreement, not to allow deciduous trees, because the purpose of this tree line is to provide an opaque, shelter, and of course deciduous trees during the wintertime wouldn't provide that. It also encouraged the city to consider requiring staking and mulching, the grading of the trees, and a guarantee of the trees. If you look at this particular bid, it doesn't include any of that. It says types of trees shall be determined later. Well, it could be a mulberry bush, we don't know. But it also doesn't say that they're guaranteeing them, that they will stake and mulch those trees, and we all know from our experience in North Dakota that if you just plant the tree and you walk away, very few of those are going to live. So there should be some kind of a requirement of a guarantee by Mr. Cook that if they don't live, that he's got the obligation to replace those. So we think the agreement, although it may include what has been discussed in the past, we'd encourage the city to be more specific. The problem we would anticipate is if he goes out there and plants trees, he's got a contract with the city, and they don't meet the city specs, they're not tall enough, what are you going to do? How are you going to enforce that? You're going to go out there and make them dig them up? Wouldn't it be better to specify up front, these trees have to be a minimum height, they have to be this kind, and you have to include mulching and staking and some kind of a guarantee in the event that the trees don't actually grow. So that's our request on behalf of Greg and Les Leffer, the owners of the property both to the south and to the east of the proposed tree line. And there may be a difference, as I've indicated. The agreement says lots 6 through 13, and 12 and 13 are on the west end of the property, so we think the tree line as proposed should go along the south side of the property and along the west, or the east side of Mr. Cook's development. Be glad to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Mouse. Are there any questions by city staff or commissioners? Mr. Colling, would you care to respond at all to Mr. Mouse's comments?
Mr. President, the agreement as we've drafted it pertains to, as Mr. Mouse said, lots 6 through 13 of Block 5. Those are the lots on, as I understand, on which Mr. Cook has intended to plant the trees. Those are the lots that are bound by the restrictive covenants on the property. And there has not been prior discussion at planning and zoning level or at city commission level about a tree row on the west end of Mr. Leffer's property. Prior discussions in city meetings have always been for that tree row to be on the north end of Mr. Leffer's property, and there have been no discussions regarding the west end of that property.
What does happen if 3 years from now the trees aren't 6 feet and they're not providing a substantially opaque hedge-like barrier? What happens at that point?
At that point, the city would have the option to file suit to enforce the agreement as it is drafted. We do know, however, that these properties are going to be sold to other people in the future. Mr. Cook is not going to be the owner of these lots anymore, and that is one of the reasons why the Planning and Zoning Commission required that restrictive covenants be placed upon these specific lots, binding the owners or future owners of those lots to maintain those trees and to keep them up, to keep them going, to keep that barrier there. Those restrictive covenants are a right of private enforcement and can be enforced by any of the benefited owners. So at that time, that would be a private right of enforcement.
So whoever buys the lots are responsible for maintaining the trees?
That's correct. And that is provided for in the restrictive covenants, that they have the obligation to maintain those trees and to keep that barrier there.
Anybody else have comments or questions? Mr. Frenzel.
I've got a question. When it comes to enforcing, let's say we have a number of these trees die, which is not out of the question. What would these people be guilty of? An infraction?
No, it would not be an infraction, Mr. Frenzel. It would actually be a breach of contract. It would be a civil action in district court to enforce a contract. It's not a criminal offense. It's not something that would go through municipal court. It'd just be a private right of enforcement. And I should add, that's the same as it is with any other property dispute between two private property owners. Occasionally we'll get calls from city residents asking what the city can do about a boundary dispute between two adjoining landowners. And there's really nothing that the city gets involved in that matter. It's, those are private rights, private property, and it's up to the owners of those properties to enforce what property rights they have.
Anybody else wish to comment or question?
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner?
unfortunately, this problem exists today because of what was said at the Plan and Zoning Board meeting that people had problems interpreting. At this time, Mr. Mouse, has there been any talk with Mr. Cook about completing that 160 feet south?
Mr. Steiner, we've had no discussions with Mr. Cook, only with the city attorney.
And Mr. LaFour, can you come to the podium, please? I wasn't at the Plan and Zoning meeting, but I heard about it for the last few months now. And I know there was talk about the border being put in there, or the buffer being put in prior to, at the end of the phase.
Correct.
I didn't hear anything about the north-south 160 feet. Was that discussed at the Plan and Zoning?
It was, and they actually identified the lot numbers, so I think we have to get clarification on that. So you need to go back and look at the video, look at the minutes, and really clarify that. That's why I had it in, asked him to place that in the bid. It can be, if we're incorrect, of course, that can be taken out, but we're talking about probably another 100-some feet, not even. You look at the difference in those bids. I just want to make sure that this is clarified, because the reason we're here again, and seems to not go away, is because things aren't specified and finalized the correct way, in my opinion, because, you know, we don't know. I don't know that this is going to get done. I don't know if anybody from the city is going to be there when he plants these trees and they're not correct. When I visited with Mr. Cashman at Cashman Nursery, he says, in my experience in the years I've been in business, he says, you need to plant at least a 5-foot tree, for the reason that the first year it's not going to probably grow very much, if any. It's going to, the second year it may start to grow, and the third year it is when it may start to take off. That's provided it's cared for and it's taken care of. That's why he has staking and mulching in his bid, and watering. And I'd be willing to water the trees. It's to my benefit also. But is somebody going to, I'm just talking about the following up of this. Is someone going to follow this? Is this going to be actually done the way he, you know, the bid that he has doesn't specify the size of the tree, doesn't specify what they're going to do with the trees, if they're going to allow a perimeter for watering. You know, this goes back a long ways. I mean, this development, all summer, I mean, I live next to this. This 12-foot that we're talking about for these trees, that had nothing to do with the streets, had nothing to do with the curbing. That could have been very easily done. That could have been, you could have taken a blade across their landscape that had those trees in. There's no reason why this has to continue to be coming up at these city commission meetings, and we have to keep dealing with this. We've got bigger fish to fry. I just want this cleaned up. I want it done right. And we don't have to discuss this again in the spring when it comes time to plant these trees, is all I'm asking. And while the restrictive covenant says it has to be a certain height and nature, does the city really want to get back into this thing again if it isn't? Are you going to pursue legal action against him or whoever the owners are at that point? Wouldn't it be simpler to really clean it up now and make sure it's done correctly? Thank you. Any other questions?
I don't think we can argue the price that he has from where he has got his quote from. I mean, we went through a bid tonight that was $80,000 in difference on 100, and, you know, top bid 178, the other one 80. So I kind of hesitate going there with this here, you know, saying you aren't spending enough on trees. I'd more likely come down on the side that you know, what type of trees, the size of trees, and then whether we need to address the 150-foot going north-south. And I don't know how we get that from planning and zoning of their discussion, whether they had this on the 150 feet. But I'm basing my decision at the last meeting on my decision on everything that I found out about through the Plan and Zoning Board, about what they were requiring. it'd be interesting to approach those members there and ask them what they remember of that discussion for the north-south border.
Did this meeting take place before we were taping planning and zoning meetings?
Mr. President, I can answer that, yes. The record is vague. I have the luxury in many ways to look at the minutes specifically because I was not involved in the process. My determination is it just includes the north side, does not include the east or the west. It doesn't specify the tree species. It allows that open. The minutes are apparent to me that it allows either deciduous or conifer trees, and it just specifies that it needs to be per the ordinance. Our ordinance specifies that you need to have an 1.5 inch caliper, and within 3 years, it needs to be 6 feet tall. So as long as the specifications come in to show that, you met the code. Now, if the trees take longer due to different soils types, that's not part of our code. That's not part of our enforcement.
Thank you, Mr. Catan.
If I may add one more thing, Mr. President, and that is, we understand that elements can change that, but the whole purpose of the buffer was to have it, to create a privacy. So a tree that had, any tree with leaves would not create a privacy. That just kind of defeats the purpose of even placing this type of buffer in place. And the second thing is these trees were supposed to be planted before any permits were issued. Now granted, you haven't issued any permits there, but you have developers that are digging basements and are pouring footings. And so if this is what the city is allowing developers to pour footings and dig basements without permits, I can understand why we're in the situation we are with this situation as far as not following up on issues. I'm just asking for this to be cleaned up is all I'm asking. Let's clean it up. Let's make sure he identifies the tree type, he identifies the height, and somebody's there in the spring to watch this guy. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner.
I'd recommend we bring Mr. Cook into this conversation, bring him up to date, and see what he comes up with.
I'm looking at the minutes of the previous meeting, and in the discussion there, it refers to both evergreens or deciduous trees. Mr. Leffler, you sat in the audience when this meeting was taking place, did you not?
Yes, I did.
Yes. Would that not have been the time to clarify what type of tree you specifically were interested in? I mean, my perception was that regarding the record, he had complied with the previous requests, whether it was to your satisfaction or not, but as it matched up to the written record, it appeared that he complied. He agreed to sign a development agreement, even though I don't think that was required of him. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Mr. Colling.
Mr. President, the Commission required the development agreement as a condition of the approval of the third Cook's Addition plat. So he was required to sign the development agreement.
But we did that at the previous meeting.
Correct.
Correct. But I mean, prior to that.
Prior to that, he was not required.
He wasn't. So it seems, you know, I kind of hesitate going back to him and say, now we got one more condition. I mean, I think it was our opportunity 2 weeks ago, if there was one more condition, to do it then.
Well, my understanding was the agreement was going to be put together and I would have a chance to review it, and only until I emailed Matt did I get an answer that he would forward the agreement. And then I emailed him back and asked him to clarify the 2 points I had, which was the size and the type of tree. And I didn't hear back from him. And so, therefore, I obtained an attorney.
I guess I don't recall that from the meeting, but Mr. Colling, do you? I mean,
I don't either, Mr. President. We did have the development agreement prepared as soon as possible and sent that out to both Mr. Cook and Mr. Leffer at the same time. What we attempted to do in the development agreement was simply to memorialize what had been talked about at prior city commission meetings. I did not attempt to put additional conditions or additional requirements into that development agreement that had not been talked about.
My understanding, again, was that these trees were going to be of evergreen nature to create a buffer. I mean, that's the whole point.
that isn't what these minutes say, though, from 2 weeks ago.
I understand that, but that's my understanding, and that's what the impression I got from speaking with several of the commissioners. So, and I don't, did you send me a copy of the agreement by mail, if I may ask, Mr. Colling?
No, I sent you a copy of the development agreement by email.
After we talked in the email, but then I responded and there was no reply.
And if I may, Mr. President, the next communication I got from Mr. Leffer was from Mr. Mouse, and I did reply to Mr. Mouse. Once a party acquires counsel and speaks through counsel, our professional rules of conduct require that we go through attorneys and not speak to represented parties directly.
That was several days, that was like several days later. So I'm sitting here, we have a commission meeting on Monday, I have no idea what's happening.
Again, I'm looking at the minutes, and in the last paragraph, it says Attorney Colling will create the development agreement and have it signed by Mr. Cook prior to the first meeting in December, and at that time, the commission would be able to approve the agreement. And I don't recall everything that was said there, but I mean, it doesn't say in the minutes that Mr. Colling would have to run this agreement by you and get your approval on it also.
I understand that, I was asking just by the courtesy of the city to let me have a look at it because of the past relationship with Mr. Cook and the things that have been promised and not followed up on, and I just wanted to make sure that everything was in place.
Mr. President.
Mr. Steiner.
Mr. Croton, I know you're not the city forester, but in here it talks about providing a substantially opaque hedge-like barrier. Mr. LaFour, also, you're not done yet. Are you saying there has to be evergreens when we talk about in here an opaque hedge-like? I mean, there's different trees, hedges that aren't evergreens that can be opaque.
Well, I understand that, but then what are we talking about when we're comparing bids here? Are we talking about, you know, you're looking at one bid that is saying evergreens, you're looking at one bid that's, we don't have no idea. So I guess let's find out which way are we going here? Are we going to go with bullberry bushes or lilac bushes, or are we going with evergreens or what? I mean, again.
Mr. Steiner, I can answer your question. You know, I think what we have is a condition that was not specified to a specific level. A hedgerow can mean, you know, all my experience in dealing with landscaping and the rest, that can mean deciduous and conifers. Opaque in turn means, for the most part, not to be sight seen in the rest. But if you say in your condition, we want an opaque hedgerow of trees, deciduous and conifers, you've kind of eliminated the opaque portion by specifying that you could have conifers and deciduous trees. The intent of that would be that, okay, throughout most of the year, you would have a hedgerow of fences. You'd have a hedgerow of vegetation, which, you know, in the summertime, you know, spring, summer, and fall, it would be nice and opaque, and in the wintertime, it would not be. In wintertime, you're not outside either, so you normally don't have those associated noises with that, you know. The idea would be that. You know, it was not specified as part of the condition. And I think as a commission, you're struggling with the idea of what was the intent of that. You have to go by what the minutes say, and the minutes was clear, and it said deciduous and deciduous or carnivore trees, and then you make your decision from there. That would be my recommendation. That would mean me as staff looking at it as objectively as I could be to interpret what they, what the intent was at the time based upon the record. So, I mean, I understand there may have been impressions on both sides, but you have, the condition stated that it can be either. And if you have conifer, if you have deciduous trees, you will lose your leaves in the wintertime, and it will be visible for that period of time. The other thing is, I think that, 12-foot off-center, if you're talking about trees, most of your deciduous trees would have to be severely pruned, and some of them would die due to being too close to one another. Your canopies for a lot of your trees that Mr. Leffers would want would be your taller trees. Those canopies would be in danger because you would be cutting off significant portions because they're too close to one another. So it can go so many different ways. I'm trying not to muddy up the water, but I'm giving you the best interpretation that I have. I would not put deciduous trees on 12-foot centers for any kind of tree that provides any kind of a ground cover. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Okay.
But conifer trees don't have a big canopy either.
They did pretty well for not being a forester.
I've dealt with it once or twice in my life.
Thank you.
Mr. President?
Mr. Coley.
One other consideration on here is when it comes to screening and buffering standards, we do have some language in our code that deals with that. And specifically on this side is section 39.08.006B2, which deals with opaque barriers and says an opaque barrier is a landscaping screen using evergreen or deciduous materials capable of providing a substantially opaque hedge-like barrier and attaining a minimum height of 6 years within 3 years of planting. That is how an opaque barrier is defined within our code. That's the same language that is incorporated into the development agreement and into the restrictive covenants that are filed against these particular lots. So if you're wondering where that language comes from, it's out of our code that we've adopted.
Any other comments, questions?
We don't know from Mr. Cook's bid what he requested that his supplier bid for his, whether we were talking conifer trees or just deciduous. We don't know that.
Yeah, Mr. Frenzel, I believe from the bid that he submitted, he indicated trees to be determined. And in talking with Mr. Cook, I believe his intent was to allow the eventual owners of those lots to have some say over which trees that they would like planted on their property.
But you're saying whatever's planted has got to create an opaque.
An opaque barrier as we've defined it in code.
It's got to be part of the.
Right.
And I think the owners of the property, if there's going to be some buyers of the property, they're going to need all this information. If they're going to make the ultimate decision by May, it just looks to me like we're going to end up with conifer trees no matter what, which is, I'm not at all opposed to it. I think it's a good idea.
Any other comments or questions? Not, would there be a motion regarding this item?
Mr. President,
Mr. Steiner.
I would still like to hold off either approving or denying this here agreement until we're able to bring Mr. Cook in and get some information from him. Would that be acceptable, Mr. LaFleur and Mr. Moss?
Yes, Mr. Steiner, would be acceptable to me, and I would appreciate it if we can just clarify this so everybody's on the same page. It doesn't have to come up again in the spring. Let's make sure everybody's talking. When we're talking about two separate bids, I have, the one from Cashman looks considerably higher. Obviously, he is giving you an exact tree specificity, specificity and also the height, the type, everything. Mulching, everything. So, I mean, we're not, let's just clear it up, and that way we can move forward, and at least everybody's on the same page. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Mr. President, the only concern I would have with that is that the commission has previously made approval of this agreement a contingency upon Mr. Cook's ability to record and move forward with the Cook's third edition plat. As I look at the record, Mr. Cook has complied with the requirements of this commission as far as signing the development agreement and providing the security pursuant to his bid that he received for planting of those trees. I think it would be my recommendation either that the city commission approve the agreement or remove the contingency or consider the contingency satisfied based upon Mr. Cook's signing of the agreement and posting of the security.
Mr. Curtana, Mr. Soren, do we have construction activity taking place up there without the proper building permits?
Mr. President, I can answer that question. You know, we have not issued a building permit. It has been our policy for some time, and I only can comment from the time that I've been here and prior to that, that in an effort to work with the development community, we allow our individual inspectors to work with each of the builders and developers. They can grade the site, and they could pour the foundation before we issue a building permit. That is kind of an expedient way to try to move the process along due to the backlog, and that has been a common practice for a while. Issuing of building permits on the residential side, I allow a lot of latitude with our inspectors, and if they've worked with a specific contractor or developer, and it's a duplicate plan, one that we have reviewed, because many of them are the same plans over and over and over, they will allow them to move forward throughout the project, even beyond that point, before we actually issue a building permit. And that's been a way in order to work with the development community instead of saying you submit your plans today and it's going to take us a month and a half until we could issue a building permit. Now, that has been going on for a period of time. If that policy, if you want that to change, we can, but you know, as we've allowed that, we haven't had the problems associated with that. So that's been an effort to work with the, work with the housing shortage that we have, with the amount of impact, and to work with the community. So.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just make one more comment on his remarks, and that is, when I visited with the builder, he is a new builder from the state of Idaho, so he has not had any history of building in this community. These are his first two properties that he's building, and he was actually, frankly, told me he was kind of surprised he didn't have to have a permit before he dug the hole and poured the footings.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Leffer.
I will leave that up to the commission. I mean, if that's been a policy that we've done for a while. If Mr. Soren wants to talk on it, but I'm fine. You can run into problems doing it that way, but we have tried to work with the community in order to expedite the permits. But if we go back to a standard, and I'm very comfortable with that, and say that you can't do anything on the site until you get a building permit, we will significantly delay every single one of our building permits.
Mr. Soren, any comments?
Yeah, I would add just a couple in respect to that. By us not issuing a permit doesn't mean that we haven't at least reviewed their setback or their site layout for the home that's being built. We certainly look at that, make sure they're complying to our setback requirements. But oftentimes we get in a situation where the builder is anxiously waiting. They may be 3 weeks out, but their concrete needs to come next week, for example. And so we have developed a relationship where we've tried to work with them to not hold them up. Certainly with the weather the way it is, we certainly get pressures to do that because of the added costs, but and we've had very little issues that have been a result of that practice.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment or additional questions?
President Johnson, just one more clarification. Mr. Corton, when a permit is not issued but a footing is being poured, inspections still occur, correct? So they are being inspected as well. The building permit may not be issued, but we are going through the process of making sure they build to our standard.
Okay. Anything else? Well, you've heard Mr. Steiner's comments, you've heard Mr. Colling's recommendations. Once again, I'm going to invite a motion here.
Well, I'll throw one out there, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Steiner.
I move that we deny the development agreement.
Is there a second? Is there a second to the motion? There's no second to the motion, so the motion dies for lack of a second. Would there be another motion?
I move that we approve the development, but add the requirement for conifer trees and the height requirements.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that one.
Okay, Mr. Colling, what does that do to the process if that motion is successful?
Well, Mr. President, that's different than the agreement that Mr. Cook has signed and provided security for, so I imagine we will have to return to security and provide him with a revised copy of the agreement, which he may choose to sign or not sign.
And the contingency that you talked about?
Contingency would remain on, as it would be, development agreement would remain contingent upon, or the recording of the third edition plat would remain contingent upon signature of a development agreement.
And what does that do to Mr. Cook right now, if that plat can't be recorded?
Mr. Corton and Mr. Soren may be better able to answer this than I, but I imagine it will preclude his further development of that property at this time.
With respect to the recording of the plat for the third edition, yes, I mean, this was contingent that this issue would be resolved, so it would not be allowed to be recorded until such a time as we come to a development agreement.
Okay, but, so it stops all activity there and then?
The other question would be, we still have the issue, you know, until development agreement is either signed, based upon the minutes and everything else, prior to issuance of a building permit, they need to have the trees in. So we still have an outstanding issue of should they try to put trees in today's condition, or they don't get a building permit issuance, or we don't allow any more construction activity until the spring. It's kind of where we're at.
It's the remaining concern that I would have is that the city has offered the development agreement to Mr. Cook. He has complied with the conditions of that development agreement as they have been expressed by this commission. And the city commission is essentially changing the rules of the agreement in the middle of the deal. And that may create some headaches down the road for us.
I really think the proper thing to do here is to approve this agreement as it's presented to us tonight, and
I'm going to strike my second, and we have development impact fees on the table with this developer too. So beyond this development agreement and beyond spring and the trees getting planted, we still haven't loosened our purse strings as far as writing out the development impact check. So it's not like we don't still have a mechanism for making sure that everything gets done properly. Is that correct? Because they're doing it in phases, so we couldn't have possibly paid out all of our phases of our development impact fees. And help me out with that.
Mr. President, the portion of the project that they have requested impact fees on, the Phase 1 and 2, have been completed and have been paid out.
But on Phase 3, we haven't. They'll certainly apply.
We don't have another, if they apply.
Right.
Yes. We haven't received that or brought that to the commission at this point.
But Mr. Altman is correct then, isn't he, if, or has a point that if they come with an application and the city is not happy with his performance on other issues, we could deny the application?
Sure, absolutely.
And you think they're not going to apply for a third time, of course, you know?
No, I know, I'm sure they're going to apply. Yeah.
Right.
And they've already made that intent very well known that they're looking for future impact fees.
Right. So I'll make the motion.
No, wait a minute.
Are we, oh, wait.
You've withdrawn your second.
I did. Yep.
Okay. So, Mr. Colling, can he withdraw a second?
Or do we need to vote?
Well,
He can withdraw a second.
He can, okay. So we still have Mr. Frenzel's motion on the table, and I can ask if there would be another commissioner that would care to second that existing motion then. So at this time, would there be someone else who would want to second Mr. Frenzel's motion?
Just clarification, and your second was with conifers?
My motion was to require conifer trees, yes. But I would consider withdrawing it if, has Mr. Cook seen that ordinance that describes what opaque is?
I have not discussed it specifically with Mr. Cook, but the language is identical. So I imagine he drew the language from the restrictive covenants from that section.
I would second the motion.
Well, just a minute. Mr. Frenzel, did you want to withdraw your motion?
I will withdraw my motion if that, the fact that we have that on an ordinance is shown to Mr. Cook. So that his, you know, I can't understand, or I don't believe that some contractor in the tree business would agree to plant large deciduous trees 12 feet apart. There's something, you know, I could see them planting conifers 12 feet apart. I wish that the bid he had actually specified trees, but it doesn't. But under the circumstances, I will withdraw my motion.
Okay. So the second is withdrawn and the motion is withdrawn. Why don't we have two motions here? Why don't we have a motion directing the city staff to send a copy of the ordinance that you're referring to Mr. Cook, so he clearly sees that. You can do that. Second motion then would be approval of this development agreement. I mean, if you want to instruct city staff to send a copy to him, okay.
Seconded.
Okay, now, this motion is sending a copy of our ordinances regarding the, where opaque and all that other language is. And I would think the intent of the motion is, Mr. Kessel, that a proper letter be written explaining why the commission has requested city staff to do that, and specifically pass, if we do pass a motion here, passing a motion on that. Okay, I think, is that kind of our intent? Okay, so now we have that motion. Did we get a second?
Yep.
We do, okay, we have motion second, further discussion. Hearing none, then we'll vote. Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Orman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, the motion carries. Now you need to act on the development agreement.
Make the motion to approve the development agreement.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the second, we have a motion and second, further discussion.
I have one question, Mr. President, and that is there a reason why we're in a hurry to get through this development agreement, that we can't wait until the next meeting so we can clarify this? I feel like the city's being pressured by Mr. Cook to hurry up and get this done so we can record this. Is there a reason why we have to be in such a hurriesome type of position here? I'm looking at the faces of the commission, everybody, and it's kind of like we're in a hurry to do this. How much building is going to be done? We're in December. We couldn't clarify this before. I just believe that's the reason why we're in this situation we are now. We get motions, we get withdrawn motions. We're like, why can't this be clarified and then move forward? We're talking about another couple weeks here. Is that the next city commission meeting that it would be on the agenda? How long?
We meet 2 weeks from now.
So 2 weeks from now would make that much difference to him, that we couldn't clarify this? And we could get it all, everything could be put down and he'd understand it and we know exactly what we're talking about as far as the trees, the types. It's 2 weeks.
I think this agreement is consistent with the past record. And I don't believe Mr. Cook is pressuring any of our city officials at all that I'm aware of.
Well, I guess I shouldn't mean pressuring, but on the other hand, it's come down to a point where we talked about him planting the trees this year. They weren't planted. He got by. Of course, he can't plant them now. And it just seems like we're dealing with one situation after another with the developer. And I'm asking the city for 2 weeks just to clarify this before we move forward. It's not like I've been pushing everybody to do this. Today this was brought up in March, planning and zoning. We've had all summer. Nothing was followed up. The trees weren't planted, and frankly, Mr. President, if I wouldn't have come to the last city commission and brought this to some of the commissioners' attention, it probably wouldn't even be talked about now or then. So the problem is things aren't followed up on. They're not, nobody was watching, and I understand that they're busy, everybody's got a job to do, and everybody's got 100 things on their plate. I understand that. But as it was said before, this guy could sell this property and it's gone. And somebody's going to be left holding the bag. And I just don't think that the city needs to come back and have to chase this man down or try to get him to fulfill the agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Colleen, if these lots are sold prior to the spring, that doesn't relieve either Mr. Cook or the new owners from planting these trees, does it? I mean,
No.
because you said it's a covenant that goes with the lot.
It is a covenant and it binds this property owner, Mr. Cook, as well as anybody who would purchase from him. We would hold the security that he's posted until those trees are planted and he's fulfilled the terms of the agreement, then we would release that.
But if we don't approve the development agreement tonight and we go to make changes, then the development agreement goes off the table, the check is returned, and then we actually have nothing. And so when you ask, is there pressure on the commission and why are we trying to get the development agreement, frankly, it's because you've called my office, you've called and talked to me. We have been concerned with you as the neighboring property, and the development agreement was put in to make assurances that you would have, the trees that you're requesting. And if you remember back to the last meeting, it was all about making sure that your request was going to be held up. And the development agreement, if it's not put in place, certainly puts it all back on the drawing board, at least in my mind.
Thank you, Mr. Altman, and your name, please, and what your interest here?
I'm Lee Christensen, and on behalf of Mike Cook, I'm just wondering, what has he not done that you've asked him to do? And I don't know, tonight we've heard that he's a fly-by-night, might never find him again, just going to sell everything and be gone. But he's built stuff in Dickinson over the last 5-6 years. So that's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. Anything else here? Okay, we do have the motion then, and the second. We'll proceed to vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
No.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Frenzel?
I'd like to comment to Mr. Curtin. Take this back to planning and zoning. In the future, let's deal with buffer zones and be specific about what's required. 1-row trees, 2-row trees, what kind of trees, so that the people know before they get here what they're up against. And we don't have to deal with this kind of issue. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Kessel, your reports.
Thank you, President Johnson and Commission. The next item is the Stark Development Corporation multi-year funding agreement. You have a copy that was presented to you in your materials. I've also presented a revised version of that on your desk this evening. The revisions are made by Stark Development themselves. They don't materially change the agreement, and I did have Attorney Colling review those as well. We both are in agreement that we don't have any problems with the changes as presented. I will say under 3A, under Develop and Manage the City's Job Creation, after a conversation with Mr. Baker from Stark Development, they would like to add the word retention after creation, since a lot of what they have been doing is job retention as well. What this agreement does is it would be initiated in January 1st of 2012. It will last 5 years. There is a 90-day termination agreement clause at the request of Stark Development. It does begin funding in 2012 at the rate of $550,000 per year and goes up $50,000 a year and maxes out in the year 2016 at $750,000. The only other revision that may be changed when it's brought to you for your vote would be the city has agreed not to make infrastructure requests to Stark Development. We did do that last year. They were kind enough to fund our project, but moving forward, we have stated that we would no longer make those types of requests of Stark Development. And that is essentially why the amounts are lower than they may have been getting previously. For instance, in 2011, they're right at about $600,000 with December distribution yet to be made. So this does have a slight regression in funding, but that's the reason, is that we wouldn't go for infrastructure. So I believe that covers the major points of the agreement. No vote again this night. It's just for a report, and if you have any questions or comments, please let me know for the next commission meeting when we'll be asking you to vote on this. If none, the next item that you have before you is a joint powers agreement. This was the document that I'll be presenting in front of the county commission tomorrow. This would establish a relationship with the City of Dickinson and Stark County to, the City of Dickinson would hire a planner, and then we would allow that planner to work for Stark County up to 80 hours per month. The amount that you see, excuse me, in here on item number 4 has been revised. We're recommending $50 per hour. That's based upon an average salary of around $55,000 a year times 35% benefits and 20% overhead. So we believe that that is enough to recoup our costs. We're not looking to make money on the deal. We simply want to provide those services. We've benefited from having a planner on our staff and believe that the county would benefit as well. So if you have any comments or questions, there's also in the revision under number 4 a 5% inflationary an amount that would be automatic beginning in January 1st of 2013. I'm not sure that this document will last that long. Our belief is that once the county has access to a planner on a regular basis, that they may actually see the need to hire a full-time planner of their own. But if there's any questions or comments, as I said, I'm presenting this to Stark County tomorrow. I would certainly like to hear your thoughts and issues. If there aren't any, the next item they have is then an Elks Building update. I did meet with Mr. Brinkman. The lawsuit that he is a party to has been settled in part. The Wells Fargo and Highball Construction have reached a settlement. My understanding is the Highball Construction insurance limit has not been reached, so that means there is room for Mr. Brinkman's organization to be reimbursed as well. So he expects that settlement agreement to be completed in January and a settlement check to be issued to his company within 60 days of the settlement agreement. What that means for us is we're standing right now without an extension being offered, and according to our counsel on this item, if we want to if our intentions are to initiate litigation, we should do so sooner than later. So essentially we have 3 options. One, and I'm not an attorney, but as I understand it, our option number 1 is to simply do nothing. Option number 2 is to initiate litigation, and option number 3 is to simply wait again or issue another continuance, for lack of a better word, as we have been doing. I also understand from Mr. Brinkman that he has another partner that is willing to provide bridge financing until the settlement monies are received. That would allow Mr. Brinkman to move forward on construction. His intention is to pay for the building permit in December and begin construction shortly thereafter, meaning the end of December. The mortgage holder on the property is putting pressure on Mr. Brinkman to get the project done sooner than later. But ultimately, you know, the city commission will have to make a choice or a decision on how to move forward with this project. He is going to be providing me the sale agreement that he has with the individual willing to provide the bridge financing. I don't have that yet, but he is willing to do that, and the contract modifications. He's met with several, if not all, of the lien holders, and the vast majority are willing to complete their work as long as he creates a fund that sets aside dollars which they can then access when their payments are due and they've reached mutual understanding of what does need to be paid. Mr. Brinkman has agreed to do that, and the bridge financing and/or settlement dollars that would be coming would be the way he'd fund that. So that is my report on the Elks Building. If you recall, we
Mr. Kessel, can I have a question, Mr. Colling? Mr. Colling, what would be the basis of our litigation? I mean, what do we hold?
Commissioner Steiner, that was going to be my last comment. We can't ask Attorney Colling for advice in this matter because he's got a conflict.
That was going to be my comment, too.
Okay, thank you.
So we have outside counsel from Ebeltoft Sickler.
That's correct, no, I remember.
Yeah. I can certainly ask that question, though, of our attorney and get back to you with a response. Unfortunately, it's not available this evening.
I'd like to know what the city holds that would be the basis of that litigation.
I'm not an attorney either, but I think the basis would be that, he hasn't completed the project in the required amount of time.
What am I trying to say here? What would we be asking in this litigation? I guess would be my question.
Okay, my understanding would be if we went to litigation, we would be asking for title to the property back. And,
Correct me if I'm wrong, we don't own the...
We don't own the building.
And that's what the community believes, that we own the building. And they're saying, why don't you just take it back? And this is a clarification I'd like to get, is we do not own the building.
We don't own the building.
We have some money that's available.
But, because of the prior history with the building was sold by the city once before. The people that bought it essentially came in, stripped everything of value out of it, and then didn't pay taxes and let it, go back for taxes. So, and that was a very, takes a long period of time for all that to transpire. So this time around, if you recall, we're not going to let that happen, that if a building doesn't get acted on in a reasonable period of time, get completed, then he would have to return the building to us, essentially in its original form. I mean, he couldn't degrade the building. Well, he's done just the opposite of that. I mean, he's added value to it. Now, you really don't want the building to come back to us in its original form. And the agreement also says that it has to come back unencumbered. Well, it's very much encumbered right now with, you heard a mortgage against it, plus there are several contractor liens against it. I'm not going to speak for our attorney, but Mr. Kessel and I have met with him. I really would be surprised if he would recommend that we litigate right now. I mean, if the building, for example, has close to a couple $1 million in mortgages and liens against it, and is not complete, we probably don't want to try get it back in that condition.
And that was the clarification I was looking for, really.
It's, it's been a frustrating process, but if you look at it, we have a building that's in much better shape today than it was when we started. We were at the point of probably demolishing it. We don't have to act on Mr. Kessel's report now, but, if we did, I would be tempted to say, let's just do nothing for a moment and see how this unfolds. I'm glad to hear that the mortgage company maybe is getting involved, but kind of waiting for that. They're the ones who can really drive this process, more so than the city can.
Thank you.
I do have one other item that's not on the agenda, just in the form of a report. The state of Kansas is experiencing a oil boom of their own, and we hosted a group of officials from the state of Kansas here in Dickinson a couple weeks ago. They were referred to us by state officials as a city who's done some things right in terms of responding to oil influences. So we spent some time there. Since then, the state of Kansas has asked some of us to go to Kansas and address individuals there specifically. So myself, Public Works Director, City Engineer Soren, and Fire Chief Sivak did do that last week. We flew down to Kansas along with Minerals Director Helms and his assistant, and we addressed approximately 70 to 80 officials from the state of Kansas on oil impacts, what to expect, and how we're dealing with the various things that come about when you have rapid growth. So I just wanted to point that out. I was proud of our community that the state sought to make the referral to the city of Dickinson, so I hope you're all pleased as well by that recommendation. And I will say that City Engineer Soren and Fire Chief Seebach did an admirable job in front of the audience. So that will conclude my report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Any comments or questions for the city administrator? Well, hearing none, then there are no public safety reports. We'll go to item 6, Public Works and Planning. And Mr. Corton, I think you have the first item there.
Mr. President, Commission, the first item is the second reading of a rezone petition for Prowse First Edition. This is Lot 1, Block 1, or the westerly portion of it. The applicant is requesting this rezone in order for them to reside on the residential property if this is approved tonight, and build a residence and then work on the existing or the abutting industrial lot. Staff recommends approval, and there has been no changes since the first reading.
Thank you, Mr. Curtin. This is ordinance 1436. If there's anyone from the public that would like to comment regarding this ordinance, please step forward at this time. State your name, we'll hear your comments. There's no one from the public that wishes to comment. Are there any comments or questions by city commissioners? If not, would there be a motion regarding second reading and final passage?
Move to approve 1436.
Is there a second? We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frenzel?
Aye.
Mr. Ullman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Mr. Catan, I think under reports, that first item is yours.
Mr. President, Commissioners, the next item is a zoning text amendment. This is staff initiated over the last several months. I've been working with the Planning Commission with respect to existing commercial and industrial developments that have non-conforming parking lots. More specifically, the gravel or dirt parking, they may not even have a concrete apron. And how do we address that situation with respect to existing new developments in which we require them to pave the approach apron and all the drive aisle and the parking spaces required. After much deliberation, the Planning Commission and city staff have come up with a proposal for you tonight. This is a report. We would like to bring it forward after tonight in ordinance form. Specifically, this would require any new commercial or industrial developments that provide a significant addition. What we're stating in our code would be over 50%. Either for the building or for required parking spaces, then they would be required to conform to the parking standard, which would mean hard surfacing of the existing parking lot and also the new addition as well. We feel this is a fair compromise in order to bring all the non-conforming commercial and industrial parking lots into conformance of what our standard is, the standard that we have throughout the city. In addition to that, I have attached a provision that is a cumulative effect in which an applicant may come in and only do 25% the first time, and then 2 years later come back with another addition for an additional 25%. The cumulative would be 50% from the date of the ordinance adoption, which that second addition would require them to pave the parking lot. I think this is a fair way of doing it. The 50% percentage is very typical for zoning codes. You use that predominantly when you're talking about non-conforming uses or other ones in trying to bring them in compliance. The Planning Commission has recommended in favor of it along with staff.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Catan. Is there any feedback from commissioners at this time? Okay. Is that it for you then?
The next one is the code enforcement report. I just wanted to highlight just the values for you. We are well ahead of building permit and alteration values. Under building permits, new ones, we have essentially doubled from last year, and the ones for alterations and addition is almost tripled from last year, and we are well ahead of the fees that we have remitted within this, for building permits at $683,000 compared to $465,000. Just to let you know, the numbers are catching up to what we had last year. We do have several permits that are waiting to be issued. I would expect that next month or year end that we will show a increase instead of being at the same level that we were last year.
Thank you, Mr. Cadon. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments for the city planner? Mr. Soren, do you have some comments you'd like to make?
Yes, thank you, President Johnson and Commissioners. Just wanted to take a few minutes and talk about some of the major projects that we've got ongoing right now. One of them being the truck reliever route on the northwest part of town. You know, a while ago we had the privilege of having the DOT come out and go on a tour with us, and that resulted in us getting the funds to do an environmental study for this route. And HDR has been selected to do that and is in the process of working on it. You know, at that point we had probably one route selected as kind of the main focus, but I wanted to point out that part of the environmental document process is looking at all of the impacts along the routes, such as wetlands, could be residential properties, utilities, things like that create cost and problems to a project like this. As part of this study, they're looking at about 4 or 5 alternatives in that direction to come up with the best solution for how this should run. One of the key components to the document is the ending points of a truck route and making sure that connectivity makes sense as well if we were to extend an east bypass or a south bypass as well. We have had one meeting regarding this, and there is we've got another one set up for the 22nd of this month with HDR to see how the progress is going. I do know they've contacted a lot of the property owners in the area and have been in the field doing some archaeological study work as well. The next item I have is our urban roads program. I have given you a list in here that shows the current projects that are currently on the DOT urban roads list. I'll just run through those briefly. For 2012, it is North Dakota 22, Hart River to 23rd Street. 2012 as well as 10th Avenue East from Villard to the I-94 overpass. 2013 is our Villard project that goes basically from interchange to interchange. 2013 also has 12th Street from Highway 22 west to 10th Avenue west. We have some rutting issues in that area. That's by the T-Rex mall there. And 2015 is 25th Avenue East. It's a reconstruction from the business loop south to East Villard. The projects that I've got listed below, that include East Villard from 10th Avenue East to 25th Avenue East, Museum Drive from Highway 22 to Sims, 10th Avenue West from 29th Street to 40th Street. That's the east side of the Cook development property. And State Avenue from 21st to 40th Street. That's kind of the west side. Those are some projects that we're looking at. They potentially could be moved up as part of our request to the DOT. Right now, we're looking at dropping that 25th Avenue East project off because of some of the higher needs in the development areas that we've got going. We're looking at cost estimates to see how the funding's going to work out on those requests right now. It kind of gives you a look. Most of these projects are the 80-20 match, with the exception of North Dakota 22. That is a regional project, which means DOT picks up the 20% match with the federal. The Villard project, the part through town is, it's a regional, but we're responsible for 10% of that. The state picks up 10, we pick up 10, and then 80% by the feds for Villard. The rest of them are all in 80-20 type funding. And that's what we're matching up is our federal allocations, which we get approximately $1 million allocated a year for projects like this. Then the last two projects that I have on the list, the wastewater treatment facility. That one we're currently at a 30% design. I have asked Apex to come out and give a presentation, and I believe they're going to try and do that at the next commission meeting. They are refining some of the building sizes and cost estimates, and should have that information at that meeting. We are looking at designing that facility to be expandable, but one of the challenges right now are there's some key building components that we're looking at. Do we build them for what we see the plant being expanded to, or do we build them for what we're currently designing for? And there's some cost implications with that. Currently the plant's being designed at 31,000 population in 20 years. I think in some of the information we've seen and waiting for NDSU's population projections to come back, we have some concerns that that may be on the low side. So that's kind of the challenge we're faced with right now as we move forward from this 30% design to final. And we'll ask them to elaborate on that more when they come. And the landfill master plan, we do have a draft on our desk right now from Wank and Associates. They've done a really good job putting that document together, and we're meeting with them later this week to go over that. We'll have them come and do a presentation to the commission as well on that project when we get it done. As part of that, they did help us draft our permit application for renewal. That's at the health department waiting on their review. They have 120 days from the date we submitted it to respond. All indications are that they're fine with the application as a whole. Some of the items that they've been helpful with in the master plan is giving us some ideas on types of equipment that we need to look at, personnel. They've even looked at some of our fee structures, and one of the things they pointed out to us is with the added waste that we're receiving from the oil industry, we may be low on the fees we're charging for that type of material, and so we are looking at that to see if we do need to make some corrections that direction. And one, I guess, last thing that I don't have on here, we had or the DOT had a informational meeting about the Highway 22 project north of town, which is being proposed to be 5-lane from the current city, well, from the end of the 5-lane now all the way to the county line. There was several people that came to that. One of the things that I've addressed with them that did concern me is with our development of Halliburton, Baker Hughes, on the corner of 40th and Highway 22, they are not proposing a signal up in that area, and I've asked them to look at that. I think they're going to recount it, and we're going to be working with them to try and get them to to see the added growth that's going to happen in that area, even though current traffic counts may not warrant a signal. When these facilities go online, I think we're going to be in trouble if we don't get something in place. So with that, I'd certainly be happy to try and answer any questions that the commission has about any of these or anything else that we've got going.
Thank you, Mr. Soren. Any comments or questions? All right. Thank you very much. A lot going on. Any reports or issues by city commissioners? Okay. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address the commission? If so, just come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments.
Mr. President, if I can make one brief introduction for you. I'd like to introduce to you Becky Weldon. She is a new attorney at our office who is going to be assisting with some of the municipal prosecution and other city services. And just wanted to introduce her to you and let her know, or let you know that you'll be seeing her around city meetings for a while here. So we have contacted the state's attorney's office regarding the municipal prosecution duties. And I believe we have 34 files in our office right now that are set for pretrial conference in January. So we're working those files and looking forward to taking over those duties in a timely manner.
Ms. Weldon, do you want to raise your hand? There you are. Okay. Okay. Well.